Hey guys, it's Jordan with your weekly Oakwood Student Ministry video. As always, hope you're doing well. We're in week 2 of our series, Do Something. We've been talking about injustice, and that brought to mind big ideas like genocide and slavery that come war and racism, prejudice, human trafficking, or even small stuff like the kid being bullied at school. Injustice. We defined it as things that are not right, that are not equal, and they're not fair. So it's not right, it's unfair, it's unequal. It's painful. It's painful to experience. It's painful to watch somebody else experience it. We have 1,000 illustrations, sadly, throughout history and in our world today. Maybe you know what it's like to be the victim of an injustice. And whenever it comes up, we ask the question, why doesn't somebody do something? And this stuff is even worse when it's ongoing. It's systemic, it's constant. There's a lot of conversations in America right now debating where that may be happening and what do we do about it. Regardless, last week we talked about how, God sees it all and He cares. He has a heart that's for the oppressed. God's not a God of injustice, a God of justice. And so part of following Jesus means, we care about what God cares about. And that's people and loving them and fighting injustice, doing something. Okay, so all that said, we're in week 2, and I want to address you, if you are the victim of an injustice this week. We always, you go on the airplane, they say, before you put an oxygen mask on somebody else, take care of your own. I want to address you, if you're the one in the room, you're the one listening who's hurting right now because you've been the victim or are the victim of an injustice. Maybe you hear everything I'm saying about God caring and all that, and you say, that's great, but what about me? What about me, Jordan? Well, if you've been the victim of racism, oppression, discrimination, prejudice, anything like that, you know what it feels like. And if you felt that way, maybe, again, you're showing up and saying, how do I handle this? What do I do about what's happening, not just around me, but to me? I want to talk to you tonight. Now, maybe on the other side, you're thinking, hey, that's not me. I've been pretty blessed. I mean, sure, maybe I got bullied or something, but nothing that big. I get that too. But remember, when one person in our family suffers, we all suffer. We all care. So this is a good opportunity for you to hear about injustice from somebody else's perspective, to put into practice what we talked about last week, how you should be curious enough to listen, just to hear from their perspective. Doesn't mean you get it, doesn't mean you understand, doesn't mean you agree necessarily, but you're at least going to hear them out and see if you can learn something. Not just about truth, although that's going to be part of it, but how to love them in the midst of where they are. That's the really important part. I've confessed to you before, I've sometimes struggled to find that. I'm so keened in on wanting to find truth, I miss the hurting people in the midst of the mess. And so it's like truth is so important, and it has its place, but when you're dealing with people, there's always another person on the other side of the conversation. So I want you to learn how to do both. I'm not throwing out truth, trust me. That's my foundation. But there's people, and you need to learn how to love them, to hear them, to listen to them before they're even going to hear your truth anyway. So, if you are experiencing injustice, what do you do? What do you do when you feel like you're alone in that? Well, we're going to go to our Bibles, and I'm going to tell you a story about 3 guys who know just where you are. All right, so on Thursday nights, I've been teaching the college and young adult group through the book of Daniel. And so I'm going to pull a story from Daniel chapter 3. See, back in that day, Israel turned away from God, the kingdom split, and God warned them for nearly 500 years. If you don't turn from the evil things you're doing, I'm going to judge you the same way the nations were judged by you, through me. And so there's a Babylonian king named Nebuchadnezzar who's very powerful, and he started conquering. He conquered and captured Israel, just as the prophets had warned he would. So he takes the best of the best from Israel, the doctors, the royalty, the ones he didn't kill, obviously, and brings them back because he's trying to make his kingdom better as he conquers other lands. And so God's people, the Hebrew nation, they get taken to Babylon for 70 years. Daniel, who the book is named after, was the main character. He was part of the royalty in Israel, and he got taken to Babylon, along with 3 friends we know as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Those weren't their actual names. Those are their given names in Babylon. It's just how we know them. It's easier than their Hebrew names. But they had their names changed from good Hebrew names that worship God just in the name to names that worshiped idols. These guys came over, and Babylon wanted to brainwash them, wanted to educate them, re-educate them in the ways of Babylon, Babylonian gods, Babylonian practices. It was a tough road for these young teenage guys. They got taken over there, had to walk 700 miles, beaten, tortured along the way, in chains. They get there, and this is what happens. Nebuchadnezzar has a really bad dream, and he gets freaked out about it. And so nobody can interpret it. Nobody can even tell him the dream. He says, tell me the dream and interpret it, or I'll kill you. Daniel stands up and says, I think my God can do it. They go, they pray. God gives him the interpretation. He tells Nebuchadnezzar this, O king of Babylon, here's the interpretation of the dream from the Hebrew guy you captured. Here it is. You saw a statue that represented the kingdoms of men, and you saw a giant stone get thrown and destroy that statue. It became a mountain, and the true King of Kings rules and reigns over all the earth from that. He says, this is what's going to happen to you. Your kingdom's going down, so is the next one, because ultimately King Jesus, the King of Kings, is going to come and rule over everything forever. Okay. Well, Nebuchadnezzar was happy that this guy could guess his dream and interpret it, so he gave Daniel and his three friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, promotions in the kingdom. But he didn't like the interpretation of the dream. In fact, he went so far to say, well, I'm going to build my own statue. I'm going to make sure it doesn't get knocked down. So he built a 90-foot-tall gold statue of himself. This guy did not have self-esteem problems. And then he says this is what we're going to do. When you hear music in the kingdom, fall down and worship me, King Nebuchadnezzar. Worship my statue. Okay. Well, as you can imagine, for people who worship God and God alone, this was a bit of a problem. So, for some reason, Daniel's not in the story. There's a couple of reasons why, but leaving that aside, his three friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, hear the music. 300,000 people in the kingdom fall and worship, and 3 men stood their ground. It didn't go unnoticed, and they got in trouble. Some tattletales went and told the king, and you could guess the king wasn't thrilled by this news. He promoted these guys. He was starting to like them, and now they just won't worship him. So he calls them in, gives them another chance, says, hey guys, you know I gave an edict. If you don't worship me, you're going to get thrown into the furnace. They had a furnace to heat the gold to make the 90-foot-tall golden statue of the king. And that thing was pretty hot. To heat, a normal campfire is around 300 to 600 degrees Fahrenheit. To heat gold, it's about 2,000 degrees. And so he says, listen, if you won't worship my statue, you're going to become part of my statue as you get thrown in to the furnace where we make the gold. Gave him one more chance to bow. And they looked at him, and I love this. Because they had previously knelt before the true King Jesus, they stood boldly before this little fake king, even with this statue. And they looked at the king and said, hey, we're not going to do it. We don't have to argue about this. We have nothing to say to you on this matter. I mean, I can just imagine he's furious at this point. And they said, look, here's the deal. We know God can rescue us, but even if he doesn't, he's God, you're not. So we're going to worship and bow to him alone and not you, O king. Well, as you can imagine, this show of great courage and faith was not met well by the king, who got furious and upset, full rage mode. He ordered the furnace, 2,000 degrees to melt gold, 7 times hotter. Had these 3 boys bound up, had them carried and thrown in. The fire was so hot, the Bible says, that the guys who carried them up, they died and were burned, just trying to get them up there to throw them in the furnace. Now, let's back up a second. I don't know of any of us that have been thrown into a fiery furnace lately. Let me know if I'm wrong. But we can all agree this just seems unfair. And we all know what it feels like to have an unfair, unjust treatment against us. Maybe you've been discriminated against your skin color. Maybe you were treated less than because of your family financial situation. Maybe you were held back because of your gender. Or maybe you just feel like you were considered less important because of something that wasn't even in your control in the first place. Okay? We've all experienced this. It can be scary, frustrating, sad. Well, that's what these guys are going through right now. That's what they're feeling while this is happening to them. It was an injustice. And in the broad scheme of things, we all know what that feels like. Let's continue with the story because I want you to see what happens once they're in the fire. This comes from Daniel chapter 3, verses 24 through 27. Then King Nebuchadnezzar leapt to his feet in amazement and asked his advisors, "Hey, weren't there 3 men we tied up and threw in the fire?" The advisors replied, "Certainly, Your Majesty." The king said, "Look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound, unharmed, and the fourth looks like a son of the gods." Nebuchadnezzar then approached the opening of the blazing furnace and shouted, "Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, hey guys, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here." So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire, and his satraps, prefects, governors, royalty, his little court there, his advisors, they all crowded around them. They saw that the fire had not harmed their bodies in any way, nor was the hair of their head singed. Their robes were not scorched. There was no smell of fire on them. Now, there's lots of different opinions about what happened, but all scholars and commentators agree this was something supernatural. You don't get thrown into a fire that hot and have nothing happen to you. Additionally, that fourth person. Some debate, was this an angel, the angel of the Lord, which I believe is a pre-incarnate Jesus? We don't know. But here's what we do know. God showed up. God was with them. They were supernaturally protected, and they were sent supernatural aid in that moment. In a moment of extreme injustice, they were not alone. God had not abandoned them or left them to their suffering. God was with them. Now, you might push back right away and say, well, he wasn't with me, right? Bad things happen. I see bad things happen. So does that mean God not there? No. That's not what I'm saying. That's what I want you to understand. God's either going to walk you around the bad things that happen in this fallen, broken world, or he's going to walk with you through it. Either way, he understands. God's heart is for the oppressed, against the oppressors. Jesus understands. He came down and he suffered in our place for us, ultimately. See, this is all going somewhere, and we need to have an eternal perspective that says God's trying to get us somewhere, and that's to him, to be with him. So again, he's going to walk us either around our problems or through it. And either way, I trust him because he's taking us somewhere. He's taking us to himself. And so if you suffered injustice, my heart breaks for you. I'm sorry, but just know his heart breaks for you. And he loves you. And he cares. And he wants to help you. Walk through it. Walk out of it. Whatever it may be, as you walk closer to him. And he's preparing a place for us in eternity in perfection. That's his promise. And we might have to walk through this to get there. I almost said walk through hell to get there, but this is as close to hell as we'll ever get. Like, we're not going there because of him and his love. I always say this when we pray with the college group. Remember, we lift up prayer requests for each other. God cares more about this than even you do. He cares more about you than you do. He cares more about what happened to you than you do. And he wants more than you do to help you walk through it, walk out of it, and walk closer to him. So in the same way as these guys, whatever you're going through, whatever injustice you're facing, you are not alone. You have a God who sees, a God who cares. Again, let that sink in. Whatever you're experiencing, whatever experience or injustice you're experiencing, you don't have to face it alone. God cared about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, made sure they weren't alone in their suffering. Did things eventually change there? Yeah, the laws changed as a result of this injustice. But they're still in Babylon. Things weren't great. They were eunuchs. Your parents can tell you what that means if you don't know. Things went bad for these guys. But while they were suffering, God cared for them and was with them, and they trusted him and relied on him in the midst of it. In the same way, God cares about you and doesn't want you to be alone when you face injustice. And he sees, he cares, and he loves you. Now, maybe you heard this story and you feel the injustice part, and you're thinking, man, I'm so tired. I'm so hurt. I'm so burned by the things I've experienced. You don't even know where to turn. Okay. Well, I want you to know you don't have to be alone. That's the whole point tonight. You're not alone. You're not alone in this. God is with you. He hears. He cares. And if you're processing that for the first time or don't know what to do next, here's some steps I want you to consider. Number 1, talk to Jesus. Again, he cares. I've bet my life on it. I have bet my life on it. Maybe even more than you realize. Share your feelings, your thoughts, your hurts with him. He cares. Go to him in prayer. I want you to remind yourself over and over and over that you're not alone. You're not alone. That's what he tells us. Remember, he'll send others to be with you. Now, it was supernatural help in this case. Maybe it's this group, this made family we have here. Maybe we can help you. So I want you to talk to your small group leader. Talk to other trusted friends or even an adult as you process what you've been through. Consider talking to your family about getting professional help, seeing a counselor. I've seen a counselor before. No shame in it. I recommend it. It's really helpful. So you can process and begin to heal. Lastly, keep moving, right? The guys on the fire didn't give up. And let's be honest here, right? You shouldn't have to do anything about the injustice. Other people shouldn't have let it happen. We should be in a better world than we are, but we're not. We're in a broken, fallen, sinful world. So at the same time, doing nothing isn't helpful for you. So keep moving. Keep moving forward here. All right, I want to go over to the other crew tonight because maybe you were like, I don't know that I've really experienced injustice yet, I would say, sadly, in this world. Well, does that mean you're the evil king in the story? Maybe. I mean, maybe not. I'm not saying that. But I think it can make us all like the people in the crowd who apparently stood by and watched this happen and did nothing. See, we all participate in injustice in some ways all the time because we allow it to happen while we watch. We're not sure what to do. We're scared, so we don't do anything. Maybe you didn't throw anybody in the fire, but have you laughed along to a racist joke or something like that? I know I've been guilty of that in the past, and it's like, I don't like that. Why did I do that? You watch people get bullied. You don't do or say anything. You don't know what to do. You're scared. You don't want to get hurt or bullied yourself, so you just let it happen. You listen to music that's degrading to women or men or whoever, right? You shop from stores that create or use child labor to create their products, and it's like, I don't even know who doesn't anymore, and it's just, am I passively part of injustice? Are you? Well, if that's you, and I think it's all of us, we can talk to God about this too. We can go to him and say, God, I want to be better. I want to be better than this. And so in Psalm 139, the writer opens up and asks God this beautiful question. He says, God, will you see if there's any offensive way in me? Search me, seek me. Like, see me clearly, God, and tell me where I'm off, where I'm wrong. This kind of introspective, honest appraisal of yourself. Asking God, who has perfect vision, perfect wisdom, perfect morality to do that. That's bold, but I think it's where we need to go, guys. Start there. Ask God for help to see the ways you've participated in injustice. This is important because the people around you, the people you care about the most, your friends from school, your family, they've been on the receiving end of injustice. And the last thing you want to do is contribute either by action or just by passively not doing anything. You can care differently, care better for them by at least opening yourself up and saying, where am I off here? Let it become personal to you. As I said, I've struggled for years in wanting to fight for truth and missing how I'm making people feel. And so do stuff like that. Research, understand how you might be winning a battle but losing the war when it comes to people and relationships. Learn, be introspective, grow. Okay. Now, again, injustice, it's painful. We all get that. But you don't have to be alone. Not only is God with you, but this group's with you. We love you. We want to help. That's why we have small groups, by the way. We want you to have a group of people who are for you. People who will listen to you, pray with you, learn with you, from you, and cheer for you when you succeed. So if you can be here, be part of small groups. They happen after we talk about a topic like this. We break out. In those conversations, you have the opportunity to be completely honest, completely raw with each other. And if you've experienced injustice, I want you to think about how you can share it with people. You can help educate, teach, learn from one another. And if you haven't, you can genuinely care just by listening and hearing from somebody else's perspective. And I'm sure that'll inform you how you can see better so you can do better, as we talked about last week. Because when you see as God sees, you'll do as he does. Sounds like a lot. And you don't have to necessarily talk to your whole group right away. Just talk to your leader. That's why they're here. They love you. They care about you. And just either way, I want this group to be a human reminder that when you experience injustice, you're not alone. Because we're only loving you with the love he's giving us. And ultimately, he's behind every good thing. So you're not alone because he sees, he cares. and because of him, we care. All right, guys, that's it for this week. We have 2 more weeks of this series. I hope to see you soon. Reach out anytime. I love you. All right, bye.